The waves were angrier than usual that evening, rolling in with a force that made most people pack up early, but Daniel Carter didn't have that luxury. He sat on a faded beach towel, eyes fixed on the horizon while his 6-year-old son, Noah, built lopsided sand castles nearby, laughing every time the water rushed forward and erased his work. Daniel smiled, though the weight in his chest never really left. Being a single dad had taught him how to smile through exhaustion, how to carry responsibility like a second spine. Ever since his wife passed 3 years ago, life had become a constant balancing act. 2 jobs, a tiny rented apartment, school lunches made before sunrise, and moments like this stolen at the end of long days just to remind Noah that life could still feel normal. The ocean had always been Daniel's quiet refuge, a place where his thoughts softened and his grief loosened its grip, even if only for an hour. He never expected that this same ocean would change his life forever. Noah suddenly stopped laughing. "Daddy," he said, pointing toward the water, his small voice tight with confusion. Daniel followed his finger and saw something that made his heart stutter. A dark shape rising and falling between the waves, too irregular to be driftwood. A moment later, an arm broke the surface, then disappeared again. Daniel was on his feet before fear could finish forming. He scanned the beach for lifeguards, but the stand was empty. The sun was sinking fast, throwing orange and crimson across the water, and most people had already left. Another wave crashed, and he heard it. Faint, broken coughing carried by the wind. "Stay here," Daniel told Noah, already stripping off his shoes. Noah grabbed his arm. "Daddy, don't go." Daniel knelt, gripping his son's shoulders, forcing calm into his voice. "I'll be right back. Watch me." "Okay, don't move." Before Noah could answer, Daniel turned and ran. The water was ice cold, knocking the breath from his lungs as he plunged in. The waves were stronger than they looked, pulling at his legs, slamming into his chest. He swam hard, every muscle burning, guided by instinct and the flicker of movement ahead. When he reached her, he realized she was unconscious or close to it. Her hair was tangled with seaweed, her face pale against the darkening water. Daniel wrapped one arm around her shoulders, keeping her head above the surface as a wave smashed into them both. "You're okay," he muttered, though he didn't know if she could hear him. "I've got you." The swim back felt impossible. Every stroke was a fight. The ocean refusing to let go. His arms shook, lungs screamed, and panic clawed at him when another wave knocked water into his mouth. For a split second, he thought of Noah standing alone on the beach, watching his father disappear beneath the surface. That thought lit something fierce inside him. Daniel kicked harder, pushed forward, and finally felt sand scrape his knees as he collapsed onto shore. He dragged her out of the surf and rolled her onto her side, coughing water himself as he checked for breathing. She sputtered, then coughed violently, cedar spilling from her lips. Daniel exhaled a shaky breath of relief. "That's it," he said softly, brushing wet hair from her face. "Breathe." Noah ran toward them, crying. "Daddy." Daniel pulled him close with one arm. "I'm okay, buddy." "She's okay, too." The woman slowly opened her eyes, confusion clouding them as she looked up at Daniel. They were a striking gray sharp even through exhaustion. She tried to speak but broke into another coughing fit. Daniel supported her, completely unaware that the woman trembling in his arms owned companies worth billions, that her face was recognized in boardrooms across continents. To him, she was just someone who needed help. An ambulance arrived after a passerby called emergency services. Paramedics wrapped the woman in a thermal blanket and checked Daniel's vitals, praising him for what he'd done. He waved it off, embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same, he said, though everyone there knew that wasn't true. As the ambulance doors closed, the woman reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice narrow, but certain. Daniel met her gaze and shrugged. "Just glad you're okay." Days passed. Life returned to its usual rhythm. Work, school runs, late-night exhaustion. Daniel assumed that was the end of it. People like her didn't come back into lives like his. But one afternoon, as he was helping Noah with homework, there was a knock at the door. Standing in the hallway was the same woman from the beach, hair neatly styled now, clothes elegant but understated. She smiled, and something in that smile felt intentional. "Hi," she said. "I've been trying to find you. My name is Elena." Daniel had no idea that this knock marked the beginning of a story far bigger than rescue. One of love, loyalty, and a billionaire who would soon realize that the bravest man she'd ever met owned nothing but his heart and gave it freely. And if this story already has your heart racing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will shock you, inspire you, and remind you that real heroes don't wear suits. Sometimes they run barefoot into the waves. Daniel stood awkwardly in the doorway, one hand resting on the door frame as if he needed something solid to lean on. Elena looked nothing like the woman he had dragged from the waves. No shaking, no pale skin, no desperate gasps for air. She was composed, confident, and carried herself with a quiet authority that made the narrow hallway feel smaller. Yet, when her eyes met his, something softened. The same vulnerability flickered there. The same unspoken gratitude. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said gently. Daniel shook his head, stepping aside. "No, it's just unexpected." Noah peeked from behind Daniel's leg, curiosity written all over his face. Elena crouched down to his level without hesitation. "You must be Noah," she said with a warm smile. "Your dad is very brave." Noah puffed up with pride. "He saved you from the ocean," he said seriously. Elena nodded. "Yes, he did." She explained that she had been caught in a sudden rip current while swimming alone, underestimated the sea, and nearly paid the price. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said, holding out a small envelope. Daniel didn't take it. "You don't have to do that," he replied firmly. "I didn't save you for money." Elena paused, surprised, not offended, but intrigued. Slowly, she lowered the envelope. "Then maybe," she said, "you'll let me thank you with dinner." Daniel hesitated. His life didn't include dinners with mysterious women who looked like they belonged in another world. But something about her honesty, her calm presence, made it hard to say no. "All right," he said. Finally, one dinner turned into conversation. Conversation turned into laughter. Elena listened, really listened. As Daniel spoke about Noah, about losing his wife, about the exhaustion and quiet joy of single fatherhood. There was no pity in her eyes, no awkward sympathy, only respect. When she spoke, she was careful, almost guarded, sharing little about herself beyond saying she traveled often and worked in business. Daniel didn't push. He didn't care what she did for a living. He cared that she laughed at Noah's jokes, that she offered to help wash dishes, that she looked at him like he mattered. Weeks passed and Elena kept returning. Sometimes with groceries, sometimes with books for Noah, sometimes just to sit on the couch and talk after Noah fell asleep. Daniel noticed small things. How people on the phone spoke to her with difference. How expensive cars occasionally waited outside without explanation. He never asked. He didn't need to. What he didn't know was that Elena Voss was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the world. CEO of a global tech empire. A woman used to power, control, and people wanting something from her. Daniel wanted nothing. The truth came out one afternoon when Daniel took Noah to the city for a science fair. Elena insisted on joining them. As they approached the venue, security guards suddenly straightened. Whispers rippled through the crowd and phones came out. "Is that?" someone murmured. Elena stopped walking. Daniel turned to her confused just as a man in a tailored suit rushed over. "Miss Voss, we weren't informed." Elena raised a hand, silencing him. Daniel stared. "Miss Voss." Elena exhaled slowly, then met his eyes. "I should have told you," she said quietly. "I'm a billionaire. I run Voss International." The world seemed to tilt. Daniel took a step back. "So all this time?" He shook his head, hurt flashing across his face. "You lied." Elena's voice trembled. "I didn't lie about who I am when it mattered. I just wanted to be seen as a person, not a title." Daniel walked away that day, confused, angry, overwhelmed by the distance her wealth suddenly created. For the first time since meeting her, Elena felt powerless. Days passed without a word. Then one night, there was a knock at her penthouse door. Daniel stood there, Noah asleep in his arms. "He asked for you," Daniel said simply. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I don't care about your money," Daniel continued. "I care that you were there for my son, that you cared. If you can promise me that none of this," he gestured vaguely, "will ever come before him, then we're okay." Elena nodded without hesitation. "I promise I'd give it all up before I lose you." Years later, headlines would explode when Elena Voss married a single dad who worked 2 jobs and owned no suits worth mentioning. People would call him lucky. They'd be wrong. Elena knew the truth. She fell in love the moment Daniel ran into the sea without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return. He didn't save a billionaire. He saved a woman. And that was everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that real love isn't about money, status, or power, then subscribe to Kind Soul Stories right now, because the next story might just restore your faith in humanity all over again.